Hello, everyone. I am here today with Dr. Erik Peper, professor at San Francisco State University, and he's an expert in biofeedback, and he runs a very unique program at San Francisco State on holistic health. There is probably the only one like that in the whole United States. Dr. Peper is a recipient of California Award for Ergonomics. And his main interest is in ways for people to mobilize their health, to increase their awareness, and through that, increase their ability to have mastery over their own health and well-being. Dr. Peper is an author of multiple books, including the most recent publication, Tech Stress, that is being released, I believe, later this week. It is a incredibly useful book that I've had the pleasure of recently reading. And I am going to now speak with Dr. Peper about some of the ideas from his book as well as from his work in general. If you are interested in learning more about Dr. Peper's work, certainly, please order the Tech Stress book, and feel free to visit Dr. Peper's blog, The Pepper Perspective, Pepper with one P, pepperperspective.com. All right, Dr. Peper, thanks so much for being here with me today.
Well, Ina, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm just really happy to share our knowledge.
Wonderful. So I would love to hear a little bit more about the way in which muscle immobility affects our health and the kind of issues that it can cause.
It's so interesting how we have so much changed. If you think about it, as a hunting and gatherer, from thousands of years ago, we would be moving, we would be resting, we would be moving. And all of a sudden, in a blink of an eye, literally in 30 or 40 years, we're now just sitting and sitting and sitting. We are really immobilized. And all the data shows that immobilization affects our health. This goes right back to the early London studies where people looked at bus drivers basically versus the conductor versus the person ticket taker, that the driver would have much higher illness rates than the ticket taker who'd be walking around. Because if you just sit, you're frozen. Now, with our technological world of the computer, the cell phone, what happens is that we are captured without knowing by the text, by the screen, by the video, and we just sit and sit and sit. So what is the impact? Well, in order for muscles to work well, they need to tighten and they need to relax. They also act as a pump to support the heart. We never think of that. But the calf muscle, for example, is often called a second heart. So what the calf muscle does, when it tightens, it pumps back the venous blood right back into the, upward. And also the lymph, so we don't get swollen legs. And now all we do is we sit, so now our heart has to work harder. We tend to, while sitting, hold more constant tension. We don't know it, but when you're mousing, you often raise your shoulders like I'm illustrating a bit. We're looking at the text, our nose to the screen. We tighten the neck and shoulder muscles. There's nothing wrong with tightening muscles. That's great. The trouble is if we hold them for a long time, then the muscles cannot regenerate. And that is probably the most important piece of our research that we found many years ago. When people work at the computer, they are unaware that they're tightening their muscles. So if you can monitor the muscle tensions in the shoulders, the trapezius muscles, or in the neck, or on the forearm, and the person is sitting there without any awareness, these muscles stay slightly up for most of them. And how does it affect it? Well, by the end of the day, you feel exhausted, you feel tired, you feel, your eyes get irritated. There are many factors like this, It is just a disaster in that sense. And let me give if you want to do an experiment to feel that effect, just as you're listening and sitting, just lift your right knee up an inch up. Just lift it up. Hold it up. You don't have to wait a long time. Just keep holding it up and where the foot is away from the floor, and already now you can already start feeling discomfort because you're holding the muscle statically. And then, however, when you relax, let it go, the muscle can relax, blood flow can continue. And that is what we do when we walk. And that is the problem of basically of immobility. So immobility, what it does in addition, especially when we work at the computer, we are sympathetically activated. We don't know that. We breathe more quickly. Our heart rate tends to go up a little bit. We're activated. We're really activated by a fight-flight response almost, or sympathetic, we are ready. And then we keep sitting. And in previous times, we would be activated, then we would actually do physical movement, we would actually run, and then we could complete the alarm reaction and regenerate. Now we don't regenerate, so we get an increase in blood pressure, increase in glucose in the bloodstream leading to inflammation, etc.
Wow. Wow.
That's a very quick way.
Right. Who would have thought that it is really immobility that is creating all those problems? Up until recently, most people thought that it was repetitive strain, repetitive use of the muscle that was creating a problem. And very few people thought that it was really the immobility that is creating all this. So thank you very much for such a detailed description of the problems that we encounter when we just keep sitting still.
Well, if I add two more pieces to it,
Absolutely.
even though it was called repetitive strain injury, which is RSI, we already found very early that some people could be, using their fingers 10,000 times, others 2,000 times. It was never related to how much you use yourself. And this is really one of the most important concepts in terms of ergonomics, which is also what the book discusses. If you get the right chair, perfectly adjusted for you, it only gives you the opportunity to sit correctly. You can still sit under stress. Mm-hmm. If you get an incorrect chair, then you have no opportunity to sit correctly. Then you have to do all these self-behaviors. And the other part of repetitive strain injury, going back to the first question of muscle tension, if I tighten a muscle and let it go, really let it go, then the muscle can regenerate, which is what you would be doing when you're walking. The muscle tightens and let go. If, on the other hand, I hold the muscle slightly tight, it cannot regenerate. And that was the major part of repetitive strain injury and emotional stress. Because when I'm stressed, without knowing, I would become slightly defensive, except it wouldn't be this exaggerated.
Okay. Thank you. That is, also incredibly important to keep in mind, the emotional part, right? So many people focus on their ergonomics, and we don't tend to think about the emotional side of it. So I would love to hear a little bit more about what are the important components of preventing the effects of tech stress on our health.
Oh, there are so many you can do. But let me start with the foundation of tech stress. And I think that will be and that really is essentially the first step. It has to be ergonomics. And the reason is that is the foundation. If the screen is too small and you have to squint, you're in trouble. If your eyes cannot see, you may need computer glasses. If you're sitting too high, if the keyboard is too high, you raise your shoulders. If the if the screen is too low, you look down. That's all part of ergonomics. That's step one, and we could talk about that later. 2, we need to be aware of how much our bodies still react in our evolutionary past ways. When stimulus occurs, we react. We don't know that we do that. Our cell phone notification occurs, we interrupt what we are doing. Each of those reactivities occur, which can activate us. So one of the recommendations is to turn off notifications, set time not to be activated. 3, learn body awareness. Really what we forget is when we work at the computer, our breathing almost always goes quicker. Part of the reason is when you're sitting, your waist is constricted by your stomach area, is constricted by your belt or waist constrictions. And that means you can only breathe in your chest. You're also more activated, so you breathe more shallowly. That leads also to areas of possible anxiety and other disorders. And so learn to breathe lower and slower. Easily do that. 3, critical. Do many movement breaks. Get up and wiggle and move. So as you're listening, for a moment, just stand up and wiggle and move. Just do it. And you do it only for 30 seconds or so or less. And all of a sudden, your energy goes up. You feel a bit more alert. And you interrupt the bracing pattern, that low-level tension you didn't know existed. And remember, this is why typing, traditional typing on a typewriter, was so different than working at the computer. When I normally typed, at the end of the line, I would have to hit return. I would move my arm. Then, when the page was finished, I have to roll the paper in. All these are uncovert, unknowing breaks and movement breaks. When I do many of those, our health is significantly improved. 5, stress management is critical. Remember, we work under deadlines, and now with our 24/7 COVID world, where we now often work at home, all of a sudden I can work all the time. I can sit all the time. I can do more work. Or I'm squeezed between my family members who need to do Zoom at another site. What is stress? Is it work stress, personal stress? Identify it and do stress management. Next, posture. When we sit at the computer, we tend to slowly, as we get involved, we let ourselves collapse more. We forget that when we collapse, we often put our body in a physiological state of defeat, of powerlessness. And at that moment, we get more exhausted. If we have a history of depression, we will get more depressed. We have more easy access to hopeless, helpless thoughts. So, take an opportunity to really arch and make yourself tall. Next, vision. If we go back in our evolutionary past, we would be looking at near objects on the ground for food, or maybe a snake or something like that. And at a far distance for friend or foe or food sources. And we continually alternated looking far and near. Now, all we do is we look at the screen. We just keep looking at this short distance. That means that our eyes have to converge, the lens tightens, and that is called near visual stress. It stays there. And if you're a very little child who mainly watches screens, it literally will affect the development of the eyes, and you'll end up becoming myopic. That's nearsighted, as 80% of children in Singapore become by the time they're in high school and they must wear glasses. So when you're working at the screen, do eye care. That means every so often, go back to that evolutionary pattern. Look at the far distance. As I look at the far distance, especially green objects, I can let my eyes diverge. They relax. The pupil, the lens flattens, relaxes. And I can even close my eyes for a moment. I close, and then I open, and I want to blink more, because when I look at the computer, I reduce blinking, which often will cause more dry eyes. Just notice the difference in the following exercise. Just for a moment, let your eyes close. And now, like you're scared, take a big gasp and open your eyes wide to look what's going on. And as you're looking, keep looking like that. And what you'll notice very quickly is that the eyes start feeling drier. You can feel it even now. Unknowingly, that's how we often look at the computer. Obviously not so exaggerated. Now do it in an opposite way. Close your eyes. Now let the air go in through your nose. Let your stomach get bigger. And now when you exhale, and I'll make a sound even though the air should go through my nose. During the exhalation, I then very softly open my eyes. So I inhale again in my stomach. Then I start exhaling, and I softly open my eyes. And when I do that, I can almost feel an increase in tearing occur, which will lubricate my eyes. Eye vision is critical. Have a positive work session. Have goals of achievement, which is often difficult when we do only work on screens, it's harder to feel results. Make a list. I did this, check it off. Then keep your cell phone and digital devices away from your body. The electromagnetic radiation, I think personally believe from the data that it is harmful. And maybe that's an evolutionary perspective. We never had that much of that signal on us. And in evolution, almost anything that's new is potentially a threat. And then, before going to sleep at night, because so many people have disturbed sleep, that is also due to worry, obviously. There are many other factors. Turn off all your blue light producing devices, all your screens, especially your cell phone. Turn those off. Don't check at the last moment. Oops, let me do more social media. What is going on? Put those away, listen to music, meet with friends. And then there are all the social connections. It's so hard to not quickly text. When we are in a social meeting, our cell phone vibrates in our pocket and automatically I check on it. Even as we're talking, but even now, if I'm talking and I would feel my cell phone vibrating, I would disturb myself. My attention goes away from our intimate conversation with the person to my cell phone. The recipient of that, which we all have experienced, feel a bit dismissed. Less. We all experience that, and yet many of us do it. So make a rule in social gatherings, at family dinners. Put the cell phone away. Do not respond to those notifications. And then I can keep going on an infinite list like this. It is just like at work, especially now with COVID. It is critical to schedule time, work time, and make that different from your social time. This is almost the first time in human evolution that we use the same media for work, for dating, for education, for family gatherings, for having, Zoom dinners together. What you want to do is separate them out. So when you go to your session for work, wear work clothing, put another shirt on that you only use for work. Turn the screen a different way. Put a different picture on the wall behind it. So now you know that it's a cue that you're entering work. It's the same rules you would do for sports to increase performance. And finally, go outside. The Japanese have a term called forest bathing for health. Being in the woods, being in nature is critical. Somehow, all the chemicals produced by the plants act as antibacterials, antiviral agents. It's remarkable that you have an 80% reduction of transmission of illnesses when you're outside in the woods.
Incredible.
I could probably keep going.
Well, this is incredibly useful advice already. Having followed some of your advice, myself in the past, I will attest that it absolutely works.
Well, thanks, Anne.
I hope that your audience, the people who are reading this book, will follow more of this advice and will improve their own health and their own well-being. Before we end, I would love to hear one example from you of, perhaps a specific person that you've worked with, who was able to use, some of these principles in improving their lives.
Well, we have so many people. The first one which comes to mind always makes me smile. We were doing a training program in San Francisco State, and we had employees, and this man reported having no problems. And we suggested that he would take breaks every 20 minutes as part of the class. He didn't really quite want to do it because why should I? I have no problems. Well, he did it. He came back the following week and he said, you know what? There's life after 5. And what he meant was by taking these little breaks, he got regenerated. Instead of finishing work, being exhausted and being draggy, all of a sudden there was aliveness. Another one, I mean, I can equally, they're all different because really the reason I go, huh, we all want a simple formula. But as you know, life is more complex. It is like, sometimes diet is a major component, etc. So I remember one of the people who used to get really irritable at work. Really, the woman was just like, by 11 o'clock in the morning, it was like really reactive. She had lots of achiness down her shoulders. But yet, what happened? What was her breakfast? Sugary cereal. She wore tight clothing, which meant that she had to breathe higher in her chest. Then when she sat, she collapsed more, which forced her to breathe even higher. That made her more anxious, plus the low blood sugar made her really become reactive. When she shifted that, which is not easy, really not easy at all, the diet, she included some protein for breakfast. She then she changed her chair by putting a little pillow at the mid back, so she would literally sit up more. Then, which is the hardest part, she loosened her belt a bit. Her waist, not belt, she wasn't wearing it, but she loosened that a bit so she could breathe lower. And all of a sudden, at 11 o'clock, she was not irritable and not reactive. It is not easy, it is not challenging, but it's pragmatic. And I think we have to think of that in that world. Maybe I should give people an experience what happens when we work without knowing, if that is okay. So what you can, as you're sitting and watching this, take an object in your dominant hand by which you normally mouse. Hold that there, and then place it sort of next to your keyboard without being, just have it there. And in a moment, I'm going to ask you to draw the letter of your street address with the mouse, not yet, and start with the last letter of the street address. So if my address is Derby Street, I would draw the letter T first with the mouse, like a drawing. Then I would click. Then I would draw the letter E. I would click. And the task is to do this, that the movement of each letter is less than a half inch, maybe 1 centimeter in height or less even. Make it very precise and very small. And then do it as quickly as possible. So you draw the last letter, then you go backwards each letter. Are you ready to do that? Now start. Really do it. Quicker, quicker. Don't make a mistake. Each letter is really small. Quicker, quicker. Do it. I think that's enough. And when you did this, did you notice you held your breath? Did you notice the tightness in your shoulders, possibly? Did you notice your whole body stiffened? Did you notice you may have been concentrating more? Almost everybody does this. This is an exaggeration how we work at the computer. Or when we look at our cell phone and we're texting. And when we're texting, we freeze, our shoulders are up, and we have no idea. So these kind of practices, which we also describe in the book and many others, are ways to become more aware how we react physically, emotionally, and mentally. We are a system which is embedded with the environment around us.
That is an incredible demonstration. I followed along with you and tried to write out my street address, and I was definitely was not breathing. Even though I knew where you were getting at, I still was not breathing, and my shoulders were definitely tightening, and my forehead got really tight. So it's incredible just how those seemingly little things can really affect us, and on the other hand, how seemingly little things can also make a really big difference. And as you said, it's not easy to make those changes, but if you make those changes, perhaps one at a time, but step by step, after a little while, you have made all those changes, and looking back, after a few weeks, you'll probably notice a really big difference that it makes on your health and your well-being.
Yes, for me, the way I do it, because I realize that I am a critter of habit, that once I get captured by the screen or work, time flies. It's just like when, a child playing computer game and the mother calls, it's time for dinner. The child says, I'll be there in a moment, and half an hour later, the mother has to call again. And so what I've realized is I can't almost trust myself. And so what I have put onto my screen is an app, and anyone can get this as a free app. It's called Stretch Break. You just go stretchbreak.com. It's free. There are many others. It pops up on your screen to remind you, and you can set different settings. For the same way, I collapse. I don't know I collapse when I work at the computer because I get so intrigued either because I want to read the text, because I'm slightly depressed, but I'm unaware that I've just collapsed. For that, I use a little biofeedback machine device which runs on my cell phone. I put it on my spine. That's called an upright go or so. And then when I start collapsing, it vibrates. So it reminds me, wait a minute, get up. What happened? Or equally, if I'm unaware of my muscle tension, I can put a device on my shoulders, on the trapezius, that measures the muscle tension. And every time the tension goes up too high for 10 seconds, it will give me a screen signal. And that is these are ways we can do it, you know.
Thank you very much. It's really useful to know. It's also, it's good to know that there are these reminders. We don't have to keep it all in our heads because that can be overwhelming. So it's wonderful to know that we have ways that, are easily accessible, relatively inexpensive, that we can use to help remind ourselves of all this. So thank you so much, Dr. Pepper. This has been a really useful conversation, and I hope that everybody who has been listening to you will get this book and follow your excellent advice. Thank you.
Ina, thank you so much for the opportunity to share the knowledge.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.